The next project is the 17th Church of Christ Scientist in Chicago. Chicago is a popular location for this year's projects. Design team, Morlights. Designers Avi Moore, John Cahill, Casey Deers, and Kelsey Nowak. The 17th Church of Christ Scientist is an iconic part of Chicago's downtown landscape. The house worship's curvilinear facade, designed by architect Harry Weiss, echoes a Greek amphitheater. The obsolete lighting had eroded the functionality of the building and diminished its relevance in the landscape. The goals of the new lighting design were to enhance the building's nuanced lines, increase efficiency, create greater comfort, safety, and function for congregants, manage a limited budget, and not alter the existing architecture. And to quote designer Avi Moore, "We gave the client exactly what they wanted." Preservation and enhancement of the interior were pivotal. Extensive mock-ups, as well as photometrically accurate renderings, were to verify light levels and achieve the design precision needed to implement dramatic improvements. Existing 500-watt incandescent downlight openings were fitted with new LED fixtures. The design and construction teams collaborated to facilitate a solution that would not require the use of scaffolding in the sanctuary. Designers were challenged to create controls which offered ease of use and remote access for exterior lighting. With the assistance of a system integrator, a DMX control system was installed in unused conduit. So congratulations to Morlights. Accepting the award for Morlights is Randy Reed.
All right.
That we're representing here is the 17th Church of Christ Scientist in Chicago, Illinois. A great job by the Morlights design team, Avi Moore, Casey Deers, John Cahill, and Kelsey Nowak. And we're going to talk a little bit to them today about their projects. This is a very historic a church designed or built back around 1968 by architect Harry Weiss, and apparently the lighting just sort of had gone downhill, and they wanted to really reinvigorate this particular installation. Lighting that had gotten old and needed some help today. So we're very fortunate to have Avi here and Casey Deers online. So I thought what I'd do is just start with a couple questions here about what you did, and maybe just start with, what were your biggest design challenges, as you think about, redesigning the interior lighting for this historic building? And then talk a little bit about the exterior as well. So Avi or Casey, which one of you would like to take the lead here?
Well, I'll kick off, and actually, if you probably go to the next image you have, I think my favorite story and challenge with this project was the church was very in tune with the way the light landed on the stone. If you look towards the far side of the organ, there's a couple of lights landing on the wall. And when we had to select new light fixtures, they were very particular about the light on the walls matching, so new and old. So I think matching that wall was really important. And then the other piece that was really important is the color. They expected their carpet and their chairs to maintain the same look that it had previously under incandescent lamps. So that was really important, looking at color temperature and making sure that we managed that in selecting a new product. And then Casey, I figure you want to talk a little bit about wiring and controls and those challenges.
Yeah, so big picture, the client loves this building. They
they love everything about it. They love every detail. They love the materials, and it, you know, is a relatively old building. They have not been able to get their 250-watt power lamps to maintain it the way that Harry Weiss originally designed it. And so they brought us in to make it look exactly the way it looked when the building opened. They wanted the interior to look exactly the way it would have been the first day they stepped foot in the building. And that's a challenge because, you know, now we have energy code. There are a lot of constraints on what we can do in the space. We can't do it literally the way that it was when it initially opened. And so we were tasked with making it look the way it looked originally, using new technology, using high efficiency LEDs, using digital controls, and really making those materials look the way that they are used to them looking and how they have not looked for at least 10 years due to lamp failures, inability to replace old equipment, and some failing technology that they needed replaced.
Any best practices for the control system selection that you use? I mean, if you had to think of, you know, perhaps some tips and, you know, best practices, is there anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, so for this project, we opted to use a DMX controller. One of the secondary functions of this space is that they do a lot of rental events in there. And so it was a priority for them to have a lot of flexibility beyond their day-to-day operations to allow their renters to come in and control it however they would like. They've shot TV shows in there, they've shot movies in there. It's a pretty iconic space, and it has a shape that's unique. So we knew we needed to control everything discreetly, but in addition to that, for their day-to-day operations, which is 80 to 90% of what the space is used for, they don't want to have to train people on their lighting system. They are very familiar with where the switches are, which button to push, and so on. And so our goal, even though technically speaking, it's a much more complex system in there, our goal is to keep it as simple as possible, give them a few buttons that do exactly what they need, and then give them a more advanced level of control from a touchscreen that they can bring out when needed. So best practices is figure out what you need to do and find a solution that does that in a simple way, because controls are always complicated on the back end, but there's no reason to expose that complexity to the user. Just make the user interface as simple as it can be, not only because it makes everybody's lives easier, but also there's a lot of research that shows the more complex lighting controls are, the less likely people are to use them. The more complex the energy savings technology is, the more likely people are to disable it so they can get on with their lives. Because on a big picture, people care about saving energy, but day to day, people have work that they have to do. They have to get in, they have to do what they're there to do. So don't make it any more complicated than it has to be for the end user.
And
Okay.
I'm going to throw one technical thing out there that I always like to say is, let's not forget that the technology we're using to light is digital in nature. Would you ever take your laptop and plug it into a dimmer? Most people would say no. So why are you taking an LED source and plugging it into a dimmer? It is ultimately a digital source. Stop using digital technology with analog controls. Dolly and DMX or other proprietary digital sources will be the best solution to dim LEDs. And quite honestly, we are happy to say that in all of our work over the last years, when we use digital dimming, we don't have any problems dimming LED sources. It's a very easy answer to dim a very simple source, which is a digital LED device. So
that is a very important comment, and I don't know, Mary Beth, if maybe we can feature that somehow, Randy, maybe in the recording, because that goes right to one of the major quality factors that we're thinking about now in the industry, and that is flicker. So how is the best way to get rid of flicker with LEDs. And in jobs like this, it will drive people crazy if you don't do it right. Here, I imagine that you have thought about it and done it right. And digital is of course, the way to do it. You can control it digitally much better than you can from an analog standpoint. And so to me, this is one of those hidden benefits of quality lighting, that if you don't do it right, people won't like the space, but they won't know why. And that hides in some of these installations. And I think we ought to feature it maybe in the presentation to say, here are some of the things that professional lighting people know that others don't. And I don't want to put an onus on contractors or anybody else, because some are very good and do these things, but you got to get professional if you're going to get it right. And that's a great example.
It truly is the case that LEDs have gotten a bad rap because people have been using them wrong. People, yes. You will hear a lot of people, Avi and I are going to a meeting in a couple of hours where we're getting told we don't want to use LEDs because of flicker, because of color quality, all these things. And the reality is, if you specify a digital luminaire, an LED, a digital luminaire with a digital protocol, if it flickers, your light is broken. It will not flicker when functioning properly, as opposed to using an ELV or a phase adaptive dimmer or a 0 to 10 volt. There is no other variables when everything is working right. It will not flicker.
Another question that intrigued us, and as we were going through the judging process here, but this decorative lighting effect on the interior dome. Talk to us about that. It certainly looks cool.
Yeah. So our scope was not only interior to restore it to its original brilliance, but also the exterior. They wanted to participate in the city skyline and have the ability to change colors to highlight special events, special days. And so we provided them with a color changing wash solution on the facade. And what that did, and this is, a fantastic example of lighting interacting with architecture. This is not a fancy light. This is basically a floodlight flooding through their very cool building, and the curved windows allow only little pieces of light through from each light. So what you're looking at is inside the building, looking up, there's clerestory windows in that dome. And on the outside, that dome is washed with a rainbow effect around the perimeter. And so you're seeing just the light that goes through those clerestory windows on the top of the dome being illuminated from the outside.
Very cool.
So a happy accident that turns into a great lighting story, right? Mixing the primary colors of light, we get white in the center, right? I mean, this is one of those just happy accidents, but just a perfect lighting, essence in the center.
Beautiful.
Tell the basics of lighting in. We ought to use it for teaching.
Which is your primary color mixing.
And are we using a DMX here?
Yes. Yeah, the entire project is DMX. Everything that we've seen is DMX controlled.
Well, yeah, and another challenge we didn't get to is, it's an existing building. It's not landmarked. They love the building enough to not landmark it, to handcuff themselves into that. Mm-hmm. But we had to really figure out how to get wire places, right? We weren't going to drill holes into structure and into stone. So the electrician did a little discovery, and the team had an aha moment, which was, wait, we had 250 watt incandescent lamps. Now we're using 50 watt LEDs. We don't need as many circuits, which means we don't need as many conduits. And welcome to Chicago, everything's in conduit, right? So we were able to remove circuits and pull DMX to that clerestory area. without having to run any new wiring, right? Well, without having to run any new conduit.
How did you go through this Chicago Platinum things? Because that's a big deal.
It's not a Chicago plenum. It's not a plenum. It's not a air plenum space.
Yeah, in the previous images, if you look at the apertures of where the lights are coming through, those are just open holes. So it's not, the ceiling is for looks.
And then the exterior lights, we use power line carrier DMX because we had existing conduit on the outside. We interfaced that. We did some testing, obviously old wiring, old transformers. We wanted to make sure that that would work. But for the exterior lights, we're actually using power line carrier to get DMX to all those individual lights.
Did you go to the job yourself and help with the commissioning?
We actually, sorry, go ahead, Casey.
No, I was just going to say, we were there participating with the commissioning technicians, helping them to set levels. We had reference images of what the space needed to look like to make it match the client's expectations. So we participated. We don't program ourselves, but we were active in the process.
And we actually acted as the architect. So we were reviewing pay reviews. We brought the electrician, we brought the electrical engineer, we brought the system integrator. So we kind of brought the whole team together to make this project happen. There wasn't an architect involved because we were really just changing lighting and maintaining the look of the building. The electrical contractor provided the electrical engineering for the project. And then the system integrator made the DMX all work with the contractors, work with us to make it all happen.
Yeah, it's a really fun way to work. We've done a few projects like that, and it's very successful because there isn't anything going on that we're not aware of. So a lot of the problems that can arise on a construction site, be it materials not purchased on time or whatever it is, that just doesn't happen because it's such a small team that's all communicating with one another. It goes very smoothly.
I'm hearing more and more about system integrators. Are you using system integrators on more and more jobs? And is it because of the complexity?
Oh my gosh, whenever we can. Having a system integrator on board is incredibly helpful in a number of different ways. One of the I should disclose, I was a system integrator prior to working for Morlights.
I was too.
Okay. Okay.
It's incredibly beneficial in a number of different ways, especially on complex projects, but even on simple projects. There is a flaw in the system when the integrator is the last person on the team because all the decisions have been made already. So in a project like this, where it's not going through a formal design, bid, build process, where you can bring the integrator on halfway through design, for example, you can bounce off of them your controls and plans, and they can tell you what you're doing wrong, which is exactly their job, as opposed to design, bid, build. You get through design, you get through bid, you start build, and then you start the conversation with the person that knows the most about the technology that you're working with. It's just too late to make some changes at that point. So as often as we can, we work with integrators. On some of our bid projects, it's just not an option. There just isn't a line on the bid form for an integrator. And it's really unfortunate because it saves a lot of time and a lot of money. And it definitely makes the electrical contractor's job easier because they have someone to call with their questions.
I want to take it even a step further. There's one control system manufacturer we use that they primarily require that there's an integrator, that they sell it, while they'll sometimes go to market where you don't have to have an integrator. 99% of the time you're going to. I think the flaw exists in all the other fixture control system manufacturers that try and do it themselves. Whether it's one manufacturer or another, they're trying to do it themselves. They're trying to do it from, someplace in New York or wherever that manufacturer happens to be. and then they're relying on service technicians or local reps to manage a construction site problem. It's really terrible. And we've tried to get some of those manufacturers to hire these entertainment people, really, right? Those are the best. And it's been so hard to get them to understand that. And I'm just gonna put it out there even more. With white tuning technology coming to almost all of our jobs, because we believe in the inside of a building feeling like the outside of a building, you can't just rely on a control system manufacturer to make that all work. You're going to have multiple fixture manufacturers with one control system manufacturer, and there isn't anyone out there who's going to say there isn't a he said, she said situation. There's some manufacturers out there that will say, well, as long as you use our drivers with our controls, everything will be fine. Well, I'm here to tell you that we've had situations where it's not fine, and it's that situation. So you really need that third party to put it all together. And like Casey was saying, work with the contractor, speak the contractor's language. Casey and I talk a lot about, as lighting designers, we have to speak architect, we have to speak engineer, we have to speak owner, we have to speak contractor, we have to speak manufacturer, distributor, right? We need that person involved who can speak contractor and control system manufacturer and translate between those worlds. This is a very specific language and translation that needs to happen.
Yeah, and at the end of the project, a lot of the issues that you're going to have are going to be because of the control system, and it is the programmer who's responsible for solving those problems or preventing them from coming up in the first place. And it's just not fair that the first time that person sees the project is like 3 days before they're supposed to be done. They are so integral to the process. They should be there all along. They should be in the early conversations.
Yeah, this is important stuff, folks. That it is really a trend in the industry. I do technical work for the American Lighting Association, and one of our our fastest growing component of membership now in residential lighting, of all things, is system integrators. And that's because whenever you see a new home, and especially the high-end homes, the system integrator should be there if that person isn't there already. And these folks are marvelous. They make it work in spite of all the problems that the contractor may have. So I share your really enthusiasm for this, and I think we've neglected it as a lighting design industry to put that integrator in there as a key component to making it happen.
Yeah, Terry, my belief is that the specification community has left controls to the manufacturers and the reps.
Yep.
We have prioritized light and light on to spaces, but we have not prioritized controllability and long-term use. I can tell you there's a few office spaces in Chicago with lighting control systems designed by really reputable lighting designers. To turn the lights on at the beginning of the day, they turn the breakers on, and at the end of the day, they turn the breakers off.
Yeah, and that's not good enough anymore.
No,
especially as we move into the well building standard era, when they've got to be changing every couple of minutes.
Yeah, our job as the lighting designer is to provide the best experience for the occupants that we can. And, you know, it's hard to understand how the primary way you interact with those lights would not be a core consideration for that. It's just integral, you know, if somebody comes in and can't find a light switch, they don't like their lighting. It is one system from controls through photons coming out.
One other thing I'll throw out there, Terry, to think about, and the rest of the group is, you know, the AIA in Chicago has started to do a 10-year award. So architects can submit projects that are 10 years old, And they need to hear from the clients. They need to take new photography. And there's a totally separate award system for a 10-year job. Now, I'll tell you, there was a job that was awarded a few years ago that I know they just reused the photos they shot before. But needless to say, why we don't think about that in the lighting industry of a, you know, long-term, and maybe it's hard for us because tax-wise, after 5 years, people are replacing systems, right? You can write it off after 5 years, so you can throw it out, you can get something new. But even at 5 years, like, we should be thinking about our designs and the longevity and our user reaction over long periods of time. Wouldn't that be more interesting? A 5-year award, 5 years later, is it still as successful as it was on day one?
Well, thank you for the excellent interview. Some great points that you made. Some great best practices. And again, congratulations on your Tesla Award.
Thank you. We've been talking about it internally. This project, there's nothing inherently big or shiny or fancy, but what I personally am most proud about this project is that we gave the client exactly what they wanted. It looks exactly the way the building looked originally. They can control it in a way that's very intuitive to them, and that makes me really proud. I don't need something big and fancy. If it's exactly what the client wants, we did our job.